Hi, and welcome back to the Britt Mayer Show. I'm excited about what we are about to do. We are going to rip the Band-Aid off the abortion machine. Don't leave. I know that's going to scare a few of you. I want you to stay. I want you to listen to every single word of this incredibly important interview. We are going to expose the hidden history of abortion and how abortion has been woven from the darkest corners of the secular moral revolution to our current culture of death and nihilism. And it's going to leave you shocked. I'm about to be joined by my warrior brother, Seth Gruber of the White Rose Resistance and the 1916 Project documentary. And this entire episode is so massively important that I'm going to ask you to push pause, to go grab a note sheet and a pencil, to take notes, listen all the way through the end, and then share this widely. Seth, welcome.
Thanks, Britt. Always good to do something with you, man. I guess I assumed your gender there, but it's incredible
You didn't guess right.
to watch mama bears really rise and lead where not enough pastors are, where not enough men are leading. Okay, and I think God's using you to raise the bar, to raise the temperature, to put it back to where it should have been initially, and to call other men to lead their homes, to be protectors, to be warriors. What we're facing right now is nothing short of the entire disintegration of Western civilization, which is a byproduct of Christendom in the first place. And they have been attacking the unborn because they hate the family. So they're going to attack the weakest member of the family. Margaret Sanger once said the most merciful thing that a large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. She once said that the marriage bed is the most degenerative influence in the social order, end quote. I mean, like, we're just getting started here, Britt. Like, the entire goal from the beginning is hate the family. So naturally, you want to silence the man. Hate the babies, okay, because they're a weight, they're a dead weight on freeing women from the consequences of their libido, if you will, by limiting birth. And if you can destroy the family and the youngest, then onward with the revolution. It won't need to have guns anymore because the culture will have been fundamentally changed from within. And those kinds of people, meaning sexually addicted, apathetic, sleeping families, are easier to control. There, I set the 10,000-foot view of what we've been facing and what we're facing right now. And you're one of the few who I think sees all of that and how it all goes together. And so thank you.
No, thank you for being here, and we're just getting warmed up. I am so glad that this interview is going to be free of the censorship issues. It's not live streamed, it's pre-recorded, so that we can go ahead and get all this information out without having to bite our tongue and walk around on eggshells. So first of all, you just launched a 1916 documentary, and I want you to tell those listening what your motivation was for this project and why it is so important today for people to receive this information and understand abortion.
Yeah, so let's put it this way. If abortion is a cesspool, then just wait until you learn what other sewers have fed into it and what other sewers it has fed. Okay, the sexual revolution, the abortion industrial complex, as we know it today, all goes together. It's one big blob, if you will. And you can't deal with the culture of death in bits and pieces, Britt. Meaning you can't just take the abortion box off the shelf and say, how did killing babies happen? And then take off your transgenderism box and say, how did chemically and surgically castrating minors happen? And then take out your critical race theory box and do the same thing. It kind of all goes together, and you have to understand how ideologies and worldviews work, okay? Ideas have consequences, and bad ideas have victims. Nature abhors a vacuum, and ideologies tend to overlap. And you'll see this about the left, by the way, or whatever you want to call it, the secular moral revolutionaries of our current death cult in America. Like, you know, if George Floyd and BLM stuff's happening, Planned Parenthood is out there giving donations to it and tweeting about this. Like Planned Parenthood is very famous, Brittany, for saying, like, the same ethics and values that drive us to protect women's reproductive freedoms are the same values and ethics that drive us to protect gender-affirming healthcare. And so you're like, okay, well, clearly you've got some weird, kooky pagan religion that seems to function as connective tissue that binds the various aspects or iterations of the culture of death today. We have to be able, as Francis Schaeffer said, to deal with these things, Britt, in totalities and not broken up into fragments. And so what the 1916 Project is, it's a film, it's a 75-minute full-length documentary and book exposing the hidden history of the secular moral revolution and the dirty little secrets of the sexual revolution to help Americans understand what has been hidden from them, what they've been lied to about. And we've been being lied to about a lot of things for a long time, Britt, okay, obviously. But when it comes to the trans stuff, the killing baby stuff, the arresting pro-life sidewalk counselors, all of the stuff that I think has most Americans concerned right now, which is the Democrat Party, firstly, they're far left run towards infanticide, towards not just like third trimester abortions, but killing babies that survive botched abortions. And you're like, why are you pushing that? Why are you so into that? What the heck's wrong with you? And then all the trans stuff in our children, which is waking up tons of even left-leaning people. You know this.
Yep.
And they're like, what? Suddenly we're becoming co-belligerents with like leftists because they're like not so far left that they want to diddle the kids and join the United Nations and reducing the age of consent so that 11-year-olds can consent to sex with a 21-year-old. Like they're waking up and realizing, where did this come from? You've done good work on that front as well. And so we're kind of exposing how this stuff all goes together, starting with the year 1916, when Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, opened her very first clinic in the Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. That became the first Planned Parenthood clinic, which is today the best funded 501c3 in human history, the largest abortion provider in the world, the largest provider of the pornographic comprehensive sexuality education in America's public schools, and the second largest provider of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for America's gender-confused youth. That's one organization.
That's despicable. I hope people understand that Planned Parenthood is not just for killing babies. Like they've moved into the new territory. And I think it was post Roe v. Wade or around then when they were like, okay, this might not be as profitable. So it's a complete assault on kids from the womb into childhood and the scars of the moms beyond. So one of the things that I thought was fascinating about your documentary, which I saw, is how you connect the dots pre-Margaret Sanger. So I think for a lot of people, this is what I would like you to just hone in on for a minute, is how so many people think Planned Parenthood and they think Margaret Sanger, but it goes so beyond her and the ideology is so deep behind her. Can you just give us like a quick overview of how Margaret Sanger came into the picture and what fueled her rise to power?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that quickly, Britt. Yeah. So, yes, we call it the 1916 Project, which is partially a riff on the 1619 Project from the New York Times, which was a flaming pile of philosophical and historical poop, which said that 1619, when the first black slaves come to American shores, that's America's real birthday. That's our real founding because we're so racist and everything's racist. And then 1619 leads to BLM and George Floyd. And so then they attack Planned Parenthood the summer of 2020 while we're canceling Aunt Jemima, the syrup lady. And they say Margaret Sanger was a racist. And so the revolution always eats their own. And so that led Planned Parenthood to cancel their founder, Margaret Sanger, take her name off their flagship building, and stop giving out the Margaret Sanger Award. Hilarious. Yeah. So that was partially why I named it that. But I didn't just take it back to 1916, although that's a real pivotal point, I think, in the decay of Western civilization and the destruction of the family and the social fabric as we know it in America today. We take it back to like the late 1700s. I mean, we could have gone back all the way to Thomas Hobbes and Leviathan if you want to, but there's only so much you can say in one project. So what's fascinating and shocking for most people to find out, and I've been testing this in front of live audiences as I'm honored, Britt, to have preached in so many pulpits on the issue of life, getting live audience reactions of tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of people to what I'm about to tell you is quite interesting, and it's shown me how little most Christians know about the history of ideas, about bad ideas, and about why 2024 looks like it does in America right now. And so Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood. Okay, however, she was mentored by a man named Havelock Ellis, who was kind of the Alfred Kinsey of England. And we do some teaching about him on the film. My book goes even deeper on him. But if you don't know who Kinsey is, you probably haven't been paying attention to anything Britt's been trying to say for the last 2 years. But Havelock Ellis was the Alfred Kinsey of England, okay, Britt? And he wrote over 100 books on every weird form of sexual experimentation. He himself was impotent, so he was always trying to find new ways to get excited. That's the PG-13 version. He hosted orgies in his home and forced his wife to watch him as he participated
Sick.
in these entanglements, if you will. He liked to experiment with hallucinogens while having orgies. And so the guy was a real weirdo. But he was very influential in the free love movement, okay, and in the sexual revolution. Well, Margaret Sanger would refer to Havelock Ellis, Britt, as like one of her number one political and sexual mentors. They remained pen pals for years because she had fled New York because she broke the New York anti-obscenity laws for spreading obscenity in the mail. And so rather than get arrested, she ships her kids off to be raised by someone else. She has her socialist friends in the New York labor movement forge her a passport, and she flees to England, and she becomes the first Kamala Harris. And what I mean by that is she sleeps her way up the levers of power.
Wow.
That's how she begins her career. She meets the Neo-Malthusians, which we'll talk about in just one second, and she sleeps with H.G. Wells, who wrote War of the Worlds. She had many adulterous affairs.
That. Okay.
But her favorite affair was with Havelock Ellis. Now, here's where it gets really, really dicey and interesting, okay? Havelock Ellis's mentor, what we're doing here, Britt, is we're tracing secular discipleship because the left has taken our strategy and they've done better to equip and raise up the next generation to be evangelists for their gospel of sex and take it to the very ends of the earth. It's the Great Commission flipped upside down. And so what we're doing is we're tracing secular discipleship here of how they used our playbook better than we have in the last 120 years in the church of the West.
Seth, come on.
So Havelock Ellis was mentored by a man named Francis Galton, Britt. Well, Francis Galton invented a word. He coined a term. He made up a phrase. Eugenics. Okay? The guy who coined the term eugenics is named Francis Galton, who was mentors to Havelock Ellis, who became, of course, the mentor to probably the singular, mostly destructive human being in the 20th century, Margaret Sanger. Well, Francis Galton was inspired when he read a book written by his half-cousin named Origin of Species, written by a guy named Charles freaking Darwin, okay, whose half-cousin... Apple doesn't fall far from the tree here, Britt. Goes, you're right. If we're going to achieve survival of the fittest, then the way we have to do that is by the elimination of the unfit. So we went awfully quickly from man as a monkey and an animal, so live like it. So survival of the fittest, right? It's an animal kingdom, so the strong will survive and the weak will die, or Darwin. To his half-cousin who says, no, the strong must kill the weak in order to survive, and coins the term eugenics. Guess who Charles Darwin was inspired by and drove his research on the beagle and his publication of the book Origin of Species? A guy named Thomas Malthus in the late 1700s, who was the first Klaus Schwab, Hillary Clinton, and Bill Gates. He believed that there was too many people on planet Earth. And if we don't do something about this soon, Mother Gaia is probably going to urinate on us. I mean, Mother Earth is pissed at us. We have to significantly reduce the Earth through neo-Malthusian eugenics, or else there's going to be a population bomb, and the world won't be able to survive the influx of new people that we're creating. Or what Margaret Sanger would say, those people who are swarming and spawning, that they shouldn't be allowed to reproduce. That's where overpopulation theory comes from. So really quickly, we went from too many people on planet Earth to survival of the fittest, man is an animal, to eliminate the unfit, to weird sexual orgy chaos dude, to child sacrifice through 5 people who were all mentored by one another and looked to their former mentor as the singular biggest influence on their life and on the revolution that they unleashed on the West in America. That was supposed to be our strategy, was discipling the next generation to be salt and light and to be ambassadors for Christ. We have failed to do our duty.
Holy smokes. So that's the actual history of Margaret Sanger's ideology that fueled the abortion movement that we are currently battling today. So today, when we hear abortion, we think very clinical, even as a Christian. You know, it's this clinical, my body, my choice. It's done in a medical office, a facility that's clean. We don't think of the ideology of eugenics that this thing was bathed and birthed from.
That's right.
You said in your documentary that the abortion issue is the linchpin, and upon this linchpin, if it's removed, the whole liberal establishment would collapse in on itself.
Yeah, it starts to collapse in on itself like a dying star.
Explain that. Why abortion? Why is abortion the linchpin? You gave us the history. We know where we're at today. We know that Kamala Harris, this is their chant. It's the one thing that they can offer their voters, their voting base. But why are you saying that that one issue is the actual linchpin? And if it's removed, the whole thing collapses?
Well, firstly, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. And so when they say that this election will be a referendum on abortion, when they say that the reason you should go out and vote is women's reproductive rights, then I just take their word for it and I go, this is your most important issue. Okay, so let's take their word for it. They're saying this is their most important issue. Fake Christian child sacrifice worshiper basketball player Steph Curry says the reason that him and his wife are going to vote for Kamala Harris is because of killing babies. Okay, Taylor Swift says the reason is because of killing babies. Everyone's saying killing babies, killing babies. So firstly, just like look at whatever causes the liberal establishment as we know it today to like start manifesting their inner legion, and then go, I bet that's the issue. Secondly, abortion is the linchpin upon which the liberal establishment swings, because those who murder the unborn cannot be trusted to govern the born. And the overturning of Roe versus Wade kind of showed this. I mean, they burned down and physically vandalized over 100 pro-life ministries around the country right after the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And they were writing, spray painting on the walls of these centers the words, if abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either. A direct domestic terrorist threat against those to be like, well, to quote Gideon in Judges 6, tearing down high places for King Jesus, that if you're focused on those core issues that are the most important to your Lord, then actually you're the threat and we're going to come for you too. And then I think from a spiritual perspective, we have to understand that abortion is not just one issue among many. Abortion is Satan's pride and joy. That's why the only phrase the left can use to defend abortion is to quote the words of our Savior at the Last Supper in the First Communion. This is my body. This is my body broken for you. This is my body, my choice. Abortion says, this is my body, I break you, baby, for me. And Christ says, this is my body, I break it for you. Now take and eat in remembrance of me. For I will not eat of this bread or drink of this wine until I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. But if Christ says, this is my body, I break it for you, take and eat, then I wonder, what joke do I get the most in my private messages on my social media platforms and in my comments, Britt, from left-wing crazy abortion kooks for the last 5 years? Jokes about eating fetuses. I'm here to tell you that that's not coincidental. That's by design. What is the central phrase of the abortion movement? This is my body, my choice. Well, if Christ says this is my body and you're quoting Jesus to defend abortion, then what would be the very next phrase that would come out of your mouth? Take and eat. That is the joke I have gotten the most for years, Britt, in my private messages and in comments across all my platforms from crazy left-wing abortion-obsessed kooks. And it's a common theme that many pro-life leaders will say they see from the abortion worshipers is they make jokes about eating fetuses. That's right. Because you said, this is my body. So the next thing you would have to say is take and eat. This is more demonic than most Christians who listen to you are willing to entertain or are ready to deal with. But if we don't deal with how demonic this is, we won't be prepared to end this evil. Lastly, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our founders created an order of rights. If you don't get the right to life right, you won't get any other rights right.
You're on fire. And it's so big and it's so dark. And I think a lot of Christians may feel unprepared to deal with something so big and so dark and so historically long. The trail is so long on this, and it's so deep and so layered. In my research, I think it's really interesting that you see right around the time of Kinsey's death in 1960, prayer is removed from our schools. And then in the 1960s was when birth control pills become widely available. And then in 1963, in a Supreme Court ruling, the court restricts schools from mandating a systemic daily reading of the Bible in school. And then from that, you have the explosion of Woodstock and everything that we have seen unfold with CICUS and all of the corruption of our education system. Going back to, with that in mind, Christians feeling woefully unprepared to shake the gates of hell on this issue.
Right.
What is your challenge and your motivation for those Christians who are listening right now and are thinking, oh my gosh, my mind is blown. This is so much deeper and darker. This is eugenics. This is communism. This is evolution, all wrapped and packaged in one word, abortion. And it's literally the upside down sacrament. What do we do?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've been living under the spell of the Johnson Amendment for a really long time, Britt. The separation of church and state. Well, if that's true, then let's keep the state out of the church. Oh, wait a second. They have no intention of doing that. Proof, go to 2020 when you could get a lap dance, kill your baby, and get special brownies. But if you wanted to worship Jesus in a congregation at 50% capacity, you were a granny killer and a super spreader. The state has no interest in leaving the church alone. And so the separation of church and state was a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Wake up, church. This country was founded by and launched by activist preacher Christians who wanted to create true liberty, which is not the freedom to do whatever you want. It's the freedom to do as you ought, to worship God as you ought to, and to be left alone by the state to raise your children in the admonition and fear of the Lord. We are a Christian country, not because everyone's Christian, or even that our laws are necessarily reflective of a Christian worldview, but that the ideals that founded the republic were fundamentally Christian and founded by Christians. That's what makes us a Christian nation. And if churches won't wake up to their civic duty to contend for righteousness politically and to push back against evil and to be involved in the cultural and political playing field, then one day you will wake up and find that there is nothing left to conserve. A conservative movement that does not prioritize the total and complete abolition of abortion as its highest political priority will one day wake up and find that there's nothing left to conserve. A nation which murders her own children is doomed to die by suicide. If we can't protect the most vulnerable, weakest amongst us, we won't protect anything else permanently in the long run either. If the evil of ripping off the limbs and dissecting the brains and selling their organs to the highest bidder does not awaken you, anger you, cause you to mourn and get off your butt and do something, then what other kind of evil will awaken you to begin acting and pushing back? We have too many pastors who say, I just preach the gospel. Well, I say to you, no, you preach a truncated, myopic little gospel made in your own image to abdicate your duty to push back against evil. You want to be apolitical, but really you're politically impotent. And the enemy of our souls masquerades whatever his new demonic assault is against the image of God as just the science and just the politics to keep the politically impotent pastor silent. Martin Luther once said, if I preach with the loudest voice and clearest exposition every portion of the truth of God, except precisely that one point at which the world and the devil are at that moment attacking, then I am not confessing Christ, however boldly I may be professing Christianity. Where the battle rages, there the loyalty of the soldier is proven. And to be steady on every other battlefield, it is mere flight and disgrace if he flinches at that one point. And there's a lot of flinching happening in American churches and pulpits right now, Britt. And if we want to know how to reverse engineer the sexual revolution and how to rebuild a culture of life and give God a reason to show America mercy, we have to open our Bibles and get our Father's heart. We have to learn about the evils that anger him the most. And what I always point Christians to is in Judges 6, when God has given the Israelites over to be ruled by the Midianites and people who hate them. And they're being robbed in broad daylight. And they produce their wheat, but it's Bernie Sanders' democratic socialism. And the Midianites just come and take it. And Gideon, before he's a mighty man of valor leading 300 men, he's a little pansy in a wine press up in the foothills, threshing his own wheat to keep it from himself from the socialists and Midianites. And God comes to him in a cave through the angel of the Lord. And he says, walk out of the cave, tear down all the Baal statues, and chop up all the Asherah poles. We're not going to talk about anything else until you deal with that. Well, Asherah poles would be orgies, temple prostitutes, and sex cults, and Baal would be baby sacrifice, because 9 months later you got to do something with the product of your irresponsibility and your belief that you have the right to orgasms without responsibility, which is the fundamental doctrine that animated Margaret Sanger as well. Tear down the sex cults and the baby killing, and then we'll talk. And until you deal with that, you're going to continue to be ruled and oppressed by the Midianites and those who hate you, because you have not stayed true to my word. You have not obeyed me. You've sacrificed your sons and daughters to demons you've made peace with, or you participated in child sacrifice. And so God's walking out of the room. I'm done. You can be ruled by foreign hordes who hate you. Until we begin to recognize that as it was in Judges 6, so it is today, that we're dealing with the same pagan gods that are destroying the American culture and the family today, until we recognize that the gospel lived out necessitates a conflict between Christianity and the demonic ideologies of the day, that these are doctrines of demons, that the culture war, simply put, is Christianity lived out. You let them call you whatever they want to. If you're a culture warrior and you're a believer, it's because you have the spirit of Gideon, and you're more concerned about tearing down death cults for King Jesus and giving him a reason to show America mercy than you are about your 501c3 statuses. Our silence on these issues as Christians and pastors has sent the next generation, Gen Z, the most medicated, depressed, suicidal, sex-addicted generation in American history, into the arms of pagan hordes to find answers to deep-rooted, disturbing spiritual questions they have, because you as a pastor are too much of a coward and a castrated fool to bring the full counsel of God into conflict with the culture to the minds of young people who are craving some clarity and some guidance on how to navigate relegate the insanity of the 2020s, but you won't bring that conflict. You won't bring that conflict to bear. You won't bring that truth because you're afraid that it'll be perceived as political and you'll lose the ties of your registered Democrats who would leave your church if you cared more about righteousness and pleasing Jesus than getting attaboys and backrubs from the Biden administration or joining Rick Warren on Klaus Schwab's private plane to go to Davos with the World Economic Forum every year. In other words, we've created a Christianity in our own image and not the Christianity of our forefathers, not the Christianity of Christendom, which built this republic. The pro-life movement used to go by another name, Britt. Christendom. Christendom. We have failed our duty. The left has taken our strategy and flipped it upside down and used it better for wickedness. You're missing out on the greatest adventure, Christian and pastor, which is to speak the truth, step out in courage and boldness, and watch how God blesses that obedience to accomplish miracles for him, who doesn't need you but chooses to use you in establishing his kingdom on earth, however long we still have here. So this is the greatest adventure, and that's why with the film and at the White Rose Resistance, we're pricking the conscience of believers, exposing the deeds of darkness, Ephesians 5:11, telling people how we got here, Hosea 4:6, my people are being destroyed for lack of knowledge. So seek knowledge and understanding, and now join me in walking out of your comfortable caves, congregations, and start tearing down high places for King Jesus before it's too late.
Amen, brother. You took us to church right there. That's real church right there, Seth Gruber. Thank you, for being so passionate about exposing the true darkness and bringing it into the sunlight, and for encouraging Christians to stand now, because it is a great adventure and we get one trip. We get one chance
Amen.
At this, and we're all going to die. So why not go boldly into the dark night and to shake those dang gates? So thank you so much. Will you come back again soon? We'll talk more.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks, Brad.
We're going to roll straight into this trailer of the 1916 project so you can see what Seth Gruber has been working so hard on.
Any church can screen.
Yes,
Britt.
Can you
Any
share
church
that
in America can screen the film. You just go to the1916project.com, the1916project.com, press host a screening. It's free. Bring it to your people. It'll come out later this fall online streaming for the world. But go to the1916project.com, pick up the book. The subtitle is The Lying, the Witch, and the War We're In. And then screen the film at your church if your pastor's got the courage and the testicular fortitude to do that, and begin waking up the people of God to take back life and take back this country.
And Seth, real quick, how can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, YouTube, Rumble, TikTok, Twitter, X, whatever. So subscribe to the Seth Gruber Show on YouTube, Rumble, or wherever you get your podcasts. And then Seth Gruber Official, you'll find me on Instagram. But yeah, help us out at YouTube and Rumble. YouTube's almost completely digitally annihilated me. And then our website's thewhiterose.life, or of course, the1916project.com.
Thank you, Seth.
Thanks, Britt. What Christians often don't understand in the culture wars and in the fight for life is that abortion is not just one issue among many. Abortion is almost the linchpin upon which the liberal establishment swings. But what happens when you pull out a linchpin? The door falls off.
It takes a long time to go from a few intellectuals believing some bad ideas to bringing those ideas into the culture more and more and more, until they bear fruit. The answer how we got here is because of the silence and inaction of the church.
Somebody might say, well, you know, Margaret Sanger, she didn't quite know exactly what she was doing. Well, first of all, you're speaking from ignorance, because she wrote about herself and she wrote what her plans were, so much so that she, impressed Adolf Hitler. How do you impress Hitler?
My father walks up to me wearing a BLM shirt, and he says to me, why are you out here fighting a white man's issue? But he was a walking poster child for all things CRT, because in critical race theory, you see racism in all things and at all times. Even when a 6'4", 260-pound black man is trying to save a baby.
We're going to expose and discover who the real Margaret Sanger was, and how her attack and assault against the family in America explains our current culture of death and upside-down world that we're living in today. This is where it all started. It was here that Sanger opened up her first unlicensed, illegal birth control clinic in 1916.
Study the past, not just to understand what happened then, but to understand what's happening now.
This is a Leviathan. Dachau. It's a fitting place to remember what happens when bad ideas are taken to their logical conclusion.
We bless the holy name of Jesus and we shout, let the baby live. Let the baby live. Let the baby live.
Stop waiting for someone else to grow a righteous culture of life for you and on your family's behalf. It will not happen. If not you, who? If not now, when?